So ladies and gentlemen, seeing that we're now 2 games done so far within the X series, clearly Capcom decided to introduce us to the third one, the last of the SNES trilogy, known as Mega Man X3, and get ready for this one. So 1995 saw the release of Mega Man X3, the third and final game for the SNES, as after this, Capcom was probably already getting ready to transition to a more official 3D lens, given that about a year or so later, the era of 3D gaming, so to speak, would soon be born with the help of the Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, and Sony PlayStation, giving us Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot, and Resident Evil's debut on Capcom's front. That being said though, Capcom still wanted to showcase one more adventure for the X series on the 16-bit console, and the result is something that is heavily varied depending on the person you ask. In my case here, you're gonna want to leave a comment and subscribe right away. Also leave a like so that YouTube knows that I exist, because I do exist, YouTube! I exist! This is living proof! Anyway, Mega Man X3, like Mega Man X2, would also use the CX4 processor chip to enable the higher graphical utility for the SNES graphics, and that is the one positive I'll start to give X3 here, as the graphics here really do shine the most when compared to the previous 2 games of the SNES trilogy. It's more colorful, the wireframes are back but look more polished, the pixelated graphics stand out in a good way as we see X looking more blue this go around, and overall there is an aesthetically pleasing vibe for Mega Man X3 that I quite like, and makes it seem as if it wasn't even built for the SNES to begin with, which again is a very good compliment. However, bear in mind that by this point into the X franchise, Inafune was extremely focused on branching the X series out for Mega Man fans to enjoy, being not just the art designer for the franchise, but also the producer and writer for the series, and by focusing on these efforts as well as getting X series onto the next console with Mega Man X4 later on, Inafune was likely getting stressed out on what the future of the X series has in store for the fans thus far. That and probably figuring out which color Zero's boob should be, green or blue, I don't know. And because of this, X3's development was shifted to a third-party company known as Minakuchi Engineering, a team that has worked alongside Capcom since the early 90s on titles such as the Mega Man Game Boy titles that were mostly ports of their NES originals, and one Sega Genesis game that I honestly wasn't aware of, but whatever I guess. That meant that for the first time ever though, X3, a major title at that, was at the hands of these guys, and if you played the previous games, then you can tell that somehow the feel of Mega Man X3 is different as soon as you start the intro stage. At least that was how I felt playing through it. X1 and X2 felt similar in how they function, but X3 as a whole just feels odd, and that's something to talk about more in details later. Now, also like X2, I did not finish this game when I first played it back then on the X collection, and to be quite honest here, I don't even remember why. I know that I was at the final stages of the game, that's for sure, but then after that, I just gave up and moved on with other ones, most notably Resident Evil 4 at the time, since the Wii version of that game was at the palm of my uncle's hands, which looking back on this memory, I hope to tackle this franchise in the near future. And I also realize this is the second time I brought up Resident Evil in the span of a few minutes, so maybe it is fate telling me to do it. But not now though, I got a few other projects on my mind as is. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, for those wondering, if you played the X collection back in the day and then picked up the Legacy collection when it released, you'll notice that a couple of things don't entirely match with Mega Man X3. For one, the version they decided to port for the X collection back in 2005 was none other than the PS1 and Sega Saturn versions, releasing in 1996 and 1997 respectively, while X4 was already doing them a major service to the franchise with the latest generation of consoles back in the day. Now as for why they didn't bring this into the Legacy collection and just giving us the original SNES version, that's an entire mystery in and of itself, but I will say some things about the PS1 and Sega Saturn versions for sure. Now these versions had what I loved the most about X3's presentation, which were the FMVs, portraying X's previous adventures as well as giving us these cool animated cutscenes of the Mavericks we face for this third title. I mean, just take a look and see for yourself. God, that just hits home every single time. Secondly, the music quality did change a bit as Capcom had to compress the 16-bit graphics to fit into something that was more into a 30-bit 2 framework, making some changes in the music files as they went along with this development. And seeing that I did tease about talking about the music back in my X2 video when we get to X3, and here we are now talking about the damn thing, let me say a few things about the music starting with the following. I did not like it. at all. Okay, so for starters here, to piggyback when I said that Mega Man X3 as a whole feels off, one of the reasons is because of the music, and I know for some that may be the case with X2, but hear me out in this instance with X3 and X3 alone. Now in X2 and X3, the music is quite different from the first game, bear in mind, it still dons the rock and roll aesthetics, but in X2's case, there was a heavier focus on guitar that I actually quite liked and enjoyed as I was breezing through stages. There were bangers in X3 for sure, such as the second Maverick stage, Flame Stags, Bubble Crabs, and the Sigma boss fight that presented what the X series offers in terms of identity. However, with X3 here, I don't know why the composition for this game ended up the way that it is, because again, it just feels off. Like it seems to be the way they have this weird sequence to them that I can't really put it into words, so just give it a listen and you'll see what I mean. But that's about it for the music here, and it's something that personally makes X3 seem forgettable in that aspect, with some exceptions like Zero's theme and Vile's theme, but the rest just don't sit right with me in the end because there really is nothing special about them. And I could really say the same for most of the game, which... oh man, we're getting there soon, you guys. Be it as it may with all the teasing now, I think it's finally time to dive in and see, after almost 10 years since my first experience with X3, what the actual deal is here. So it's going to be quite interesting for me to see what exactly X and Zero has to offer this third time around. Alright, so who knows when, after the events of Sigma giving out those Disney Plus membership passwords back in Mega Man X2, the X-Hunters and Wolverine Sigma have long been gone, as well as Mavericks in general, thanks to the efforts of a Reploid scientist named Dr. Doppler, who managed to find a cure with the help of his neurocomputer that will help Reploids avoid becoming Maverick. Something that up until now, you have to wonder how and why the very Reploids you faced throughout the previous games suddenly had it out for X in the world. Turns out it was because it was a computer virus in their system that told them to become the world's Terminator and wreak havoc against humanity. That sounds about right. Because of Doppler's efforts, this allowed many who were cured under him to be a part of his cult, his mentorship, now establishing for themselves a new home for Reploids known as Doppler Town, a Reploid safe haven from the threat of becoming Mavericks and finally living in cooperation with humans after so long. For about a few months, that is, as they began to be corrupted by the very virus they were cured from and are sent out to form another invasion against the world. Now with Doppler leading the charge, which of course is not true, as it's shown in the PS1 and Sega Saturn versions that Doppler is really under the control of Sigma. So yeah, Sigma's back baby like he always is, because it's a thing now for this series, don't bother asking. And as this Maverick invasion kicks in, it's now up to both X and Zero to once again get their busters ready to go as they tackle a Maverick Hunter mission that's ahead of them, and that's about it for the story of Mega Man X3, and it's one that's definitely expansive to say the least. I mean, I know it's not a great one, but it is one that expands onto the lore of the X series as it did with Mega Man X2, despite changing some things around like the Maverick phenomenon for instance. When the whole Maverick idea was presented back in X1, it was stated that Reploids were given the ability to have free will, and in some cases, many chose to be Maverick because, well, they simply felt like it. And in Maverick Hunter X's cases with both Storm Eagle and Chill Penguin, they chose to side with Sigma in the end because, again, they felt like it was the right thing to do. Here in X3 though, nah, screw free will because these guys are robots and robots have computer data in them, so just inject that Maverick virus like it's some kind of steroids and let's see what happens from there on, and that kind of bothers me a bit considering the fact of what was presented previously. I guess in some way this does kind of explain the events of Mega Man X5 to skip way ahead here for a bit, but I just still don't like the sudden change in continuity, even if it's just to give X an excuse to fight again, because clearly this man, or robot, is not going to commit war crimes. Much like X2, we also learned about why Sigma can come back, and I know I said it's because of him transferring his computer data on a hard drive and pray he come back with a new body every single time, but here in X3 they deal with that a little bit further, with Dr. Doppler telling X after his defeat that the very reason why he and the Reploids of Doppler Town went Maverick in the first place is because Sigma's true form is that of a computer virus, enabling himself to come back in a new body every time. Now looking like he took a Captain America phase as he's using a round shield to attack and kick your ass, and later turning into what I guess is a transformer after you beat his first phase. Like, okay, good on you, I suppose. But after wiping out his second Transformer phase, you then have to deal with his virus form, looking like that of X2's with a whole big face and wireframes and the such. Man, Capcom really loved using the wireframes. Anyway, before long, X with the help of Zero manages to destroy the Sigma virus, escape the facility, and oh god, okay fine Capcom, I see what you're doing here. Once again, stare out into the horizon to ponder about their very fate as Reploids. And man, I gotta tell you guys, I understand the consistency in giving us these endings, but man, does it get really funny by the end of it. X must destroy Zero. Whoa, hold on, what? Yeah, so apparently this game also decided to throw some major lore in saying that in order to save mankind, as in I'm talking about the entire world here, X has to destroy Zero. And it's like, okay, hold on a minute there, Capcom. There were no hints to this at all throughout the course of this game here besides what was stated in X2, where Sigma told us that Zero was destined for the dark side, but that was in X2, so why throw this random fact towards the end like it was just casual information? Now, could this be the result of a mistranslation? Who can really say for sure, but it's just funny to see X3 throw this major lore dump that will soon be revealed in X5, so spoilers for that video. Okay, truth be told, I am quite indifferent to the story here because it bears no real significance in the end since Doppler isn't mentioned for the rest of the franchise, Sigma does what Sigma always does, and aside from the huge lore drop with X and Zero in the end, X3 as a whole is just another standard Mega Man X game, but with a few key differences that honestly made me feel like this was the worst that Capcom made for the X series thus far. Keep that thought in mind when we get to X6 and X7, by the way. Gameplay is the same as previously, so that bears no repetition considering the same will occur in the next games to come, but here with X3, man, they really screwed things up that, I cannot lie, felt very frustrating to experience because what the hell was Capcom even thinking in greenlighting this major difficulty spike that X3 somehow provides? What I mean by this is not only are you walking through each stage to fight each Maverick as per you do in the Mega Man X franchise, but for some reason they decided to beef up the regular enemies and cause major damage to X like they're the Mavericks themselves. And it's like, what the hell, man? Who allowed this to even happen in the first place? Because as far as I'm concerned, Capcom, X1 and X2 did not have this random difficulty curve, and they kept the game fairly balanced for players to still have that challenge, but not get punished by it. However, here in X3, that entire mentality of being punished for basically playing the game is presented in every stage. And I really mean by what I say in terms of every single stage. These guys, for some baffling reason, take almost a third of your health away, and in some cases where there are so many of them in one area, or the ones that really do a number on X, I ended up losing a life or two because there's so much being thrown at you while expecting you to know what you're doing, which can majorly put some people off if this ends up being their first Mega Man X experience, to which I say do not do it. You're better off just playing this in order and then having the courage to tackle what X3 offers. Because of this, I had to go and get the hard tanks as well as the armor parts to get an advantage immediately, but even by doing that bare minimum for the beginning of the game, the stages themselves still punish you because of the positioning of the enemies too. Like for example here in Tunnel Rhino stage, why in God's name did they have these crab enemies take so much health from me and then be at the very place that I need to wall jump from? Or in the beginning of Gravity Beetle stage with a plethora of platforming and enemies being in each platform that I need to jump on. And so much more of this crap was in every single stage. Seriously Capcom, this is pure bad game design and I absolutely hate it. And man, talk about the layout and stages here for Mega Man X3 because I completely do not understand the intentions that Capcom had here. So in each stage, to give a little bit of context, you have your standard platforming as you do in the Mega Man X franchise. Sure, that's a given, but they feel like they drag on here in Mega Man X3 because of how unamusing they seem to be. I'm telling you guys, these stages bore the hell out of me, lacking anything that popped out despite the usage of the CX4 chip as I mentioned before. Like sure, this game feels a lot better graphically, and I did give X3 that compliment, but the stages do not feel appealing to me at all, and they all have these mini bosses to face as well, which gets pretty annoying because they're so prevalent in this game. Every single stage has a mini boss to face, further dragging the stage along because now you gotta face this giant rhyming robot in your way in Tunnel Rhinos' stage, or this weird squid thing in Toxic Seahorse's stage, to even this ridiculous wireframe animation in Blast Hornets' stage, and it's like, goddamn Capcom, can we please just get a move on already? What's even more painful about these stages stages is that if you die to a mini boss before beating them, you don't just respawn back to the door. Oh no, Capcom decided to say otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, because they decided to bring X's ass all the way back to the beginning of the stage if you die. And it's just so baffling to see why they did this in the end, because it bears no real purpose to simply retrace your steps just to reach the mini boss door, only to get your ass whooped by the same enemies that caused you trouble the first time. Can you please stop doing that, for spark's sakes? Can we get a move on already here? Can you guys tell how much I really love this game? Not only that, but alongside these mini-bosses, you are also greeted to both Bit and Byte, Doppler's assistants who show up like the X-Hunters in Mega Man X2 after beating the second Maverick. But unlike the X-Hunters in that game, where you know where to look for them in the map before selecting a Maverick, you now have to play a game of freaking Guess Who as you randomly encounter them when you progress through the game normally, causing the game to further drag along if you end up losing to them. Now of course Bit and Byte's difficulty is not hard in the slightest since they have a rather easy pattern to follow and understand, especially in Byte's case, but that's not the point of them because like I said, they are not the X-Hunters from Mega Man X2. They do not provide anything else other than wondering if the moment you enter that mini boss door, will it be an empty room for you to continue on with this drag out stage already, or will it be one of the two buffoons who will show up to give you an extra order of catching these hands? This no apparent feeling of being on edge is what I don't like the most about Mega Man X3, especially in the beginning of the game where you have to deal with either Bit or Byte, depending on your luck, and I really wish they treated them like the X-Hunters in Mega Man X2, and I know I've said that plenty already, but the reason I'm saying it is because there was at least an incentive to beat them in the end, or at least treat them like Vile in this game, who yeah, has a special stage for you to tackle if you choose to, since it's completely optional for some bizarre reason, and requires to be found in every stage if you look hard enough. Oh, and yeah, the knockoff Boba Fett is back in this game too, who could have known, being dubbed as the Mystery Maverick when he was first introduced to us. And when this cutscene happened, I kid you not, I bursted out laughing because you can clearly see who it is. There's no need to tell me otherwise, Capcom. Come on, let's just move on. You're dragging the game too much as it is. Now Vile is much like the same as last time, using a right armor to cheat and then using the same skills as before, except now instead of purple, he's now donning the colors of the Mandalorian here with a weird beetle shield on his back, and I don't know what to make of it honestly, but he's just here with very little consequences to it. He shows up, loses, says he'll come back next time, to which I also laughed out loud because he won't show up for another 5 games. Get cucked, you cheap Star Wars knockoff. Oh, and let's not forget about Sigma here, who in this game has 2 of the most ridiculous forms both design-wise and gameplay wise, that for this, I had to use the Rookie Hunter mode that the Legacy Collection provides because I was burnt out in the end, and even then, I was pretty frustrated by it. Both the second phase where you have to hit his head, which is this tiny hitbox to it, and that final phase where it's just the Sigma virus itself forcing you to walk jump upwards to avoid the random lava that seemingly showed up, were a nightmare to finish because it just required so much from you without even giving you a warning about it. Man, X3 just didn't do it for me, you guys. Even though I did play this game as intended, there was so much about it that just fell off when compared to the previous 2 games. And if you think I will blame the developers of the game, then you are only partially correct, because despite the horrendous decisions they made in making the game as it is, if you take a good look from afar, X3 is still a Mega Man X game, and there are some things that I do like. So here in X3, you get to play as Zero for the very first time, marking his unofficial official debut, as really it's in X4 that he becomes an official playable character. In every stage, you get an option to swap between X and Zero via the pause menu, allowing some play diversity as you go through the game. Of course, you only get to play as Zero for a brief moment in time, as until you reach a mini-boss door, he proceeds to dip out and tell X to continue onwards because apparently he has a phobia to doors, which I can't blame him at all because I do too now that I've dealt with the idiocy that is Bit and Byte. I really want to say more about Zero here, but I didn't really play much with him, and honestly, you'll probably have to wait until I cover X4, since I think it's better to emphasize his gameplay there than here. Overall, Zero's a neat touch of the game, and I like that they at least wanted to incorporate him into the gameplay aspect before really testing him out later on. As for X, well, he's blue and naked again, so go get those heart tanks, E-tanks, and armor parts a 3rd time around, and in the case of the armor parts here, man, they just exist, and like the story itself, I feel so indifferent to it. I like the color scheme for it, sure, and if you have all the items, you get to have the gold armor by the end of it, where Dr. Light decides to not only enhance his upgrades, but turn him into a Saint Seiya character that can now heal slowly when idle. And the upgrades that X gets in this game with the armor parts, well, they're more or less the same as the previous 2 games, so don't expect too much to be quite honest here. The leg upgrade gives X the air dash like an X2, but now he has the option to dash upwards, which is both wonky and not so fun to pull off because it just doesn't feel that well placed. The body upgrade gives X a shield and added defense, which is the only good quality I find from this armor given the aforementioned stupid difficulty curve, and the shield is like this blue circle around them that kind of reminds me a lot of the blue shield in Sonic 2, and again doesn't really do anything really. The arm upgrade, man, talk about a downgrade in charge shots because you can now do the 2 charge shots like that of X2, but they have this weird lag to it where you release it and it doesn't create that same lasting impact like before, especially when you're dealing with the final bosses like Sigma's second phase with that again aforementioned tiny hitbox. Lastly, and the one that I find to be the worst of them in my opinion, is the head upgrade because it does nothing but give you this mini-map feature in the beginning of the stage to see what missing items are in the stage and where to get them. But the layout of the map is so confusing because it doesn't tell you exactly where you are in the stage and exactly where the items are located. It's basically this green map with red dots somewhere around the area. Good luck and find them, don't ask other questions, Capcom most likely said. I really want to like this armor because conceptually it is a great idea and design wise I like the more orange palette that X got going for him here, but in execution it doesn't feel like it was utilized to the fullest capacity, I'll be quite honest. I can really say the same thing about the right armors here too, which you can find them as hidden items in 4 stages, and when you see the weird yellow panel in each stage, that's the place to activate the right armors, where you got the standard one with a fizz, spiky fizz, gun with wings, and frog legs with guns, but like I said, they didn't do it for me either. In the end, and you can argue this, X3 definitely feels like the worst of the SNES trilogy, and I should stress the SNES trilogy because compare X3 to the other games we're going to tackle soon, it's at least at the middle mark because like I said, there are good things about this game that I quite enjoyed, but with the overabundance in enemies, the random boss encounters and difficulty spike, it feels like they were trying to throw in way too many things for the sake of being different. In fact, that's the best way I can describe X3 when compared to the previous 2 games. Different, but not in a good way, as in more so in trying to cram things into one place kind of way that ultimately loses its edge and ability to perform the way it should have been. There were so many things that simply could have been handled better, like the difficulty balance and stage dynamics, that really cripples X3 to a fault because of how it was executed in the end. I don't like these additions that Minakuchi Engineering did for X3 here, and if it was to make the game feel different, well then they got the job done here, but not in the best way possible. There's simply so much that this game expects you to do aside from what you know already from the X games, and if this is your first Mega Man X game, well like I said, you will most likely be confused as to how this game feels when you inevitably end up playing the others moving forward. But that's enough out of that, since it's now time to cut the cord here with Mega Man X3 and just let it be, you know, be what it is, because the next time we're covering Mega Man X is gonna be Mega Man X4, the first of the PS1 trilogy that I honestly believe a lot of people remember playing and kind of grew up with as time went on with the X series here, so stay tuned for that one. Of course, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you are new. Since we now hit 3K, we're only getting bigger and better with each new video, so make sure to support the channel whenever possible. As always, thank you guys so much for all the support. Keep being awesome, keep spreading loving kindness into the world, keep improving yourselves each and every day by 1%, and know that I love you guys forever and always to 120. And I can't wait to see you all next time. Remember guys, stay freaking sexy, stay safe out there, and well, take care!